ChatGPT, the two words that have shaken the industry of AI and the headlines in the last few weeks. Some were very excited to see how advanced AI has become. Others were very scared, thinking the Matrix kind of style is going to take over, AI is going to take over the world. And others, and I mean students, were just relieved that someone's going to be writing their essay for them. Today, with our esteemed panelists, we're going to be discussing the role of ChatGPT in Fintech and the financial world. So we have, first of all, Abdallah Sheikh, the founder and CEO of Astra, Jinesh Patel, managing partner of Integra Partners, and last but not least, Saadi Azeem, partner at McKinsey & Company. If we could have a round of applause for our panelists. So in no specific order, Jinesh, I'm going to start with you. 20 years ago, we used to think, can computer beat human beings in the stock market? And then we saw quantitative hedge funds kind of doing that. And more recently, we saw ChatGPT choosing best performing stocks and giving, to some extent, financial advice. Do you think ChatGPT and generative AI can beat a venture capitalist?
I hope not. Put a lot of us out of a job if that was the case. I'm a fairly optimistic guy. I think that the value of AI is quite broad. And as an industry participant, a data-driven approach to investing, whether you're in public markets or private markets, has always been the way that markets have evolved. So when quantitative funds came into the hedge fund world, there was a fund called Renaissance Technologies, which pioneered this. This fund had been around for over 30 years, some of the best returns in the hedge fund world. And back then, AI wasn't even a phrase, but they'd been pioneering this in the quant space. In venture, there are over 25 funds in the world today that have an AI-driven approach to investing. But I do think that venture is a very information asymmetric type of business. It's very people-driven, and depending on the stage at which you invest, I do feel that having a data-driven approach is important, but I do also sense that when you think about exits and looking at scale for companies that you're investing at a seed stage or Series A, there are a lot more variables that AI is not going to solve for, or at least at this stage. So I'm very optimistic, but like pretty much every investment manager out there in public and private markets, we are adopting various tools to optimize and improve the return on our risk.
Thank you so much, Abdallah. I want to ask you the same question, but from a different approach. So we know Bottom's application, the Ultra app, can do everything. They can book tickets for you. They can book visa appointments for you. You can text, you can call, you can literally do anything you want. Is AI replacing the personal assistant?
I think if we're going to look at replacements, I think it's not just the personal assistants jobs that are at risk. If you look at, if you just want to step back and consider the computing power of GPT or a large language model, if we look at just the jump between ChatGPT 3.5, which was about 175 billion parameters, just to give you a bit of a feel of how big 175 billion parameters, you need probably like 5,000 Stanford universities working for 300 years non-stop to generate that kind of input, let alone analyze it. And the jump between that and GPT-4 maybe happened within a year. So you look at 1 trillion parameters now within GPT-4. So if we think our jobs in the normal sense are still in the game, they're probably not even close, right? The version of GPT or the version of AI that we're looking at right now in consumer hands is a very diluted version of what actually exists or of what the computational power can actually do. So booking tickets, searching prices, figuring out what is the fastest route for a flight, that's just child's play. What the systems can actually do is immensely incredible. And can it compute stocks, venture, and so on? I think that's also, like Jinesh said, is coming in very, very soon at a very rapid rate. At Bottom, I think our focus is to try and utilize the consumer case much faster. If we look, there had been a lot of previous technologies like blockchain, for example, came around, extremely exciting buzzword. If you ask anybody in this room who used blockchain in their daily life, I don't think anybody did. But we're trying to change the paradigm with GPT. Today, we're enabling people with a GPT to actually do day-to-day tasks, and we're really increasing adoption much faster within bottom. And that's what we're aiming to. But if we come back to the question around people's jobs and their job safety, I think everybody needs to take a very long look back and figure out their competence as compared to a language model and see how they need to adapt their career to it.
Before I move on to Saadi, I want to ask you, is there an issue of privacy here?
Well, I mean, the issue of privacy is ancient. It's not today's work, right? We've heard it with every time the internet jumped a generation, the question around incubating privacy becomes bigger and bigger. So when we moved from first generation internet, where we were only sharing a little bit of text and some voice, to second generation internet, where multimedia was a factor, the question of privacy became prevalent. When you moved from 2G to 3G, the question of privacy becomes more and more prevalent. Now we're on 5G internet, and internet is now IoT and is now connected to everything in your life, right? So it turns on your lights, it listens to your house, it has all kinds of access. But I think what platforms like ours do is try and abide as much as possible with data protection regulation and try and abide as much as possible with the respective data integrations of our users. But everybody in here knows it's no secret, data privacy will always remain in the spotlight of question every time the technology makes a jump. But yeah, is it, and again, now those language models are being trained on people's data. We all know this, it's no surprise. OpenAI launched on top of Microsoft Bing's, which is everybody's search records. Google is launching on top of your Gmail data, and everybody's signed the,
But wouldn't it be centralized?
I don't think anytime soon. I think there will evolve 4 or 5 very big language models. And eventually the way it's going to look like is the language models are going to present the internet, and then there will be use cases. So if you think about it in a more simpler simile, the language models are going to be sort of like refrigeration, and somebody's going to make Coke and Pepsi and Sprite and what have you. So you're going to have all the different use cases. So the centralization is not going to happen at the front-end level.
Thank you, Abdallah. Saadi, you've worked closely with governments and big corporations. Are they afraid of the AI getting out of control per se?
Yeah. I think to begin with, there are a couple of risks which are very real with AI, right? And just to give you some examples, a lot of these models are built on trained data sets. And if these data sets are biased, this can lead to outputs which can lead to discrimination and all. There are IP issues, so if you used data which is owned by someone else, there's a question mark who owns the model versus who owns the insights. And there are other risks associated with, my colleagues talked about job placement. There's an environmental risk with so much computing capacity. There's an environmental risk as well, especially if it's on premises. So there are questions, but I think the opportunity is much bigger. I mean, our research indicates that globally this is a $1 trillion market. And if we just think about the region where we are in, if we get that fair share, it's a huge opportunity for businesses. So they have to balance the regulatory framework here. I mean, there are obviously 2 options. One is if you take a more macro lens, which is run by the regulator, that can slow down some of the things. But if you, at a basic minimum, what we encourage our clients to do is, within your models, you need to have ethical experts, who can call out biasness, who can make sure there's a proper rigorous testing of these models. So any discrimination or any risk that I highlighted before, any customer consent is available before. So this in itself is a very critical topic. And as we see the evolution of AI, as we capture that opportunity, the institutions would have to invest in the ethics of AI as well.
But there is fear from the governmental and the big corporation sides?
I think there is fear, but the opportunity is much bigger. The way when we get into our discussions with our clients, I think people are much more excited about, right now, ethics is a bit of an afterthought. It will become a primary concern maybe in the future. A lot of the institutions in this region specifically are in early stages of AI transformations or scale-ups, right? They're still trying to comprehend what does AI mean for their business, how do they need to change their business models, what are the opportunities for them, what are the specific use cases for them. There is a discussion about FAIR, more on the regulatory side, less on the private sector side. But it is still in the backdrop. Right now, it's all about, okay, I want to be the first one out, capture the opportunity. I want to build this capability. How can I hire the best talent? How can I build the right data platforms? And then, okay, let's make sure we have the right people in the room we don't end up doing anything wrong. So it's a balance we have to strike. We cannot obviously over-regulate it. It will kill a lot of the innovation. So this balance is very critical.
Enough with the bad news and the fear. Let's talk about more the opportunities, but I wanted to start from the fear level. Jinesh, going back to you. In the last earnings seasons, we saw the terminology AI in the earning calls at a record high. Do you see this in business plans given to you by entrepreneurs on a daily basis in their plans? How prevalent is it?
I mean, I think probably in the last 2 days since being here, and pretty much every conference I've been to since ChatGPT came on stream, AI is the new buzzword in every pitch deck we see. It tends to be a panacea for all manner of sins when it comes to investing in early stage businesses. And the reality is that for us, AI is a tool and a capability that can enhance the value proposition or the use case of a business. And if it doesn't serve a purpose, it's very hard for us to quantify what the value of that is. So when we go to investing in a Series A business or even a seed stage business, we do need to fundamentally understand what is the use case, what is the business model, what are the founders trying to achieve, what problems are they trying to solve. And if AI is a solution, last year it was blockchain. During COVID, quantum computing became a buzzword. There's always a buzzword in every cycle. And right now, I think that due to ChatGPT, there's a lot of awareness around generative AI and AI in general. But I don't think that for us as investors, our view on how to invest has changed. The components of AI that will drive various businesses and verticals will remain there. I think that the companies that do adopt it will have a much stronger advantage at scale. But again, the issues around ethics, the issues around targeting the actual problem. It might be controversial, but for a long period of time, blockchain was a problem looking for a solution. Yeah. AI doesn't have that fundamental issue. It's a question of how you adopt various types of AI, not just generative AI, into the business cases that we look to invest in.
Apart from the ethical part, there's also the issue of a proper digital infrastructure. So Abdallah, my question to you is, so we know in the GCC, they have a good digital infrastructure to cater for this growth in AI. What about the rest of the MENA region? You think they're prepared for that?
So I think when technology takes over, it happens irrespective of how prepared we are for it. And do I think MENA is ready for AI to start happening? Definitely. I mean, we can start seeing, it's unlike blockchain, like Jinesh mentioned, it's not like it's a problem looking for a solution. We can already see the day-to-day implementations that can happen across. I think MENA in general has an infrastructural problem, whether it's GCC or not GCC. When you start looking at the foundations and the basis of this, for you to build a language model, you need supercomputing at a certain level. We do not have supercomputing. We buy somebody else's supercomputers, so this is not our infrastructure per se. You need cloud infrastructure to be able to run all of this computation that's happening. We do not have, to a large extent, sovereign cloud. We have somebody else's cloud. We do not have our own cell phones. We're using somebody else's cell phones. We do not have our own software. So it's not a GCC MENA problem. It's a 99% to 1% of the world problem. Does anybody have the infrastructure? Sad to say, not really. It's maybe two places in the world where this infrastructure kind of exists, and everybody else is going to be sitting on top of those two kinds of infrastructure unless somebody wakes up and starts building infrastructure for the rest of us. But that's more of the infrastructure problem, is most of us, like you said, if there is a fear, it's that we speak of AI today, and I hear a lot of people saying, oh, it will only do what we tell it to do. We will give it the data. This thing created 1 trillion parameters out of sort of 100 pieces of information. So it has the ability to generate. And it has a mind of its own, which means it has bias. It can decide on its own. The thing about generative AI is once you feed the model data, you don't really control the outcome. You're giving it data and it's generating a completely new outcome that might not sit well with whoever coded the data into it. And the fact that all of this will sit on top of somebody else's infrastructure, this is where things become a little more questionable. But is MENA ready? I think obviously you have very high cell phone penetration, you have very high internet penetration. We've seen adoption of platforms happen extremely fast over, even in countries like with much lower GDP like Egypt and what have you. You've seen the adoption. And I think this is just the next wave.
And with Bottom specifically and Bottom GPT, are you seeing this at ease with customers? Also, you have a big base in India, I believe.
Yes. So with Bottom is MENA's largest consumer platform in terms of user size, right? So we're talking about 140, 150 million users that are actively using the platform on almost daily basis. What we've tried to establish here is if you look at OpenAI today or if you look at any GPT or language model today, there's a lot of barriers to access. Most retail users do not have access to it. There is a paywall, you need a very good computer to access it and so on. What we've been trying to do is pull down that experience to the retail user level and put it on their cell phone so they can chat into it irrespective of their financial background or whether they can afford it or not. Do we see the adoption at scary levels, right? We see the adoption at very, very exciting levels because all of a sudden you've had this user who've never used a digital financial service before ever in their life, right? This is the person that has been using cash on cash all their life, now texting into a GPT saying, I want to send money back home. So we've just, I think, brought AI much closer to people who'd have never had access to them. And the fact that the user experience happens conversationally means everybody knows how to use it. Everybody almost is innate, knows how to communicate or text on top of a platform. So we definitely do see the adoption. And this is why I repeat, it's not a problem looking for a solution. It's not like blockchain or quantum computing. We just throw it out there and, founders salt and pepper the word AI on top of their pitch decks to make it look nice. No, it's an actual thing that a taxi driver can use, I can use, my grandmother can use, and we can use it now. So that's where it becomes a very different ballgame than what we've seen before.
Thank you, Abdallah. So we've covered startups and tech firms. Saadi, going back to you, what are the best opportunities that can benefit from generative AI in financial institutions?
I think there are a lot of opportunities. In a lot of our client discussions in the last 3-4 years, I think institutions were very early stage, and they started doing a proof of concepts, and now they're scaling up. But essentially, the opportunities across 3-4 areas. One is on your marketing and sales side, so how it can improve your revenue generation, how you can be more productive. We are seeing a lot of applications or use cases where you can make your frontline more intelligent. So it's a concept that we call hybrid intelligence, where the model works with the frontline and make them more intelligent. They can help them in pitch books, in presentations, more targeted customer efforts. So there's a lot of opportunity on the front line. Then there's a lot of opportunities on the what we call the operation side of things or customer care side of things. So when you call someone on a call center, how can the bot or the model help you make very targeted pitches? On a large institutions, there are a lot of these overhead costs, be it the fraud, the AMLs of the world, be it the legal contracts. So there is a lot of opportunity we are seeing across the board, whether it is the front side of the business, which is customer facing, or the non-customer facing. I think the key is how do you capture this opportunity, because we have seen there's some learnings from institutions who have done it really well. One of them is that it's the hybrid intelligence concept, where the models and your subject matter experts have to work in tandem to deliver outputs which can be explained, which can be digested by the frontline, by the people, by the customers as well. Because if this is treated as an isolated, let's say, innovation capability building project, where you put a bunch of technical talent and they build models, it doesn't go anywhere. What we've seen is when you have the right senior level board commitment, management commitment, the front line embedded in building these models, because remember these outputs of these models are very hard to understand for a normal person, right? So a lot of the incumbent institutions who have been there for the last 20, 30 years, the people have thought a certain way. Now, you need to make sure these models are understood by the people who invest in these capabilities. So that hybrid intelligence comes in the way, and therefore, this is the right way to capture the opportunity. So in our experience, working with a lot of our clients, I think most organizations underestimate the need for a classical change management or a data-driven decision-making, which is needed for a big institution. For fintechs and startups, it's easy to do because you're more nimble, but for large institutions, that's extremely important. And then, in addition to your operating model, you have to invest in data. I mean, if we think about our region, there's data within, there's private data, there's public data, and the data is in all form of shapes and forms in different platforms, right? And how do you combine all of this and build these large models is fundamentally an important challenge, and therefore a lot of the banks or the institutions we work with are on that journey to make sure they have this all in one place and they invest for the future. So there's a way to capture this opportunity, and we're seeing good results out, and I think hopefully, as this scales up, as this with ChatGPT, this becomes more common, the artificial intelligence will lead to greater shareholder value creation.
Thank you so much. And for my last round of questions, Jinesh, I want to go back to you. You said something very important. So we know in real estate, it's all about location, location, location. In VCs, it's about people, people, people. You said that this will still not stop or halt the importance of the people talent. Can you elaborate on that more specifically when it comes to VCs and startups?
I think early stage investing is all about people. You're investing in founders who are trying to build solutions and businesses that solve the biggest problems in their respective markets, verticals, or geographies. I think you have to have some context. If you're investing in a seed stage or even pre-seed stage company, there isn't enough data to be able to quantify and qualify the likelihood of success. The data doesn't support that today, and it never has done. You have to rely on the founders. You have to basically understand and appreciate what they're delivering. If I had this discussion yesterday with somebody here, if I could solve for one thing using AI, which is execution track record of founders that pitch to us, I would not be sitting here. I'd be probably sitting on that beach and just writing checks to every founder that I could predict with a 99% probability could execute to the business model that they said they would. I'd also eat my shoe if any founder actually does deliver on the business model that they claim to have. But the reality is that that's not the case. And so there are so many variables in what we do because of that information asymmetry. And a founder can present the best idea in the world, and there are many, many founders that come to us with what I would define as phenomenal ideas, but not very good businesses, not very good teams, not very great capabilities. So I do feel that the people component of early stage investing is super important.
Thank you. Abdallah, 2 days ago, I received an email with the subject line, the Everything app. I will not name the company who sent that email, but its mother company is a big tech firm. I want to ask you, can small-sized firms and medium-sized firms coexist when the big firms decide with their deep pockets and unlimited resources to go full on with generative AI?
The minute a company becomes, maybe Jinesh would know this, the minute the company becomes the institution, it's much more difficult to maintain status, right? It's much more difficult to actually grow bigger. The more bureaucratic you become as a business, you actually give more room for, if you will, the renegades of that industry to come and take back over again, right? The everything company, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't, I wouldn't have chosen that line for any kind of company, It's becoming a thing where I think, and this is part of where we always go into my conversation with people when they tell me, why do you coin yourself an ultra platform, not a super platform or what have you? imagine I walk to you into a pitch and I say, listen, I know my core business isn't going to make money, so I'm going to become the everything business and sell everything to make money. You'd probably laugh me out of the room, right? And this is where most of those companies are shaping up to be. It's a business model that was built around making tons of losses and then, shifting your weight around to say, okay, now I'm a fintech, but now I'm a food thing, but now I'm a grocery thing. And all of that is now coining up to go away. Generative AI plays a big part in that. User stickiness plays a big part in that. When we look at a platform like Bottom, and you're conversing on this platform, you're probably spending hours a day on this platform. But when you're on the everything platform, you're probably on it for like a minute of FaceTime a day, if need be, right? If all of us here go back 10 years ago and you could have just texted into a chatbot, can you get me a taxi on the door of Medina Jumeirah? The everything company would not exist today. So this is where we're going. I think simplicity and going back to the basics of the actual foundation of communication is what's happening. We own phones to communicate, not to call taxis and not to use specific digital use cases. The actual base use case of any handheld device is to communicate. And I think this is where most of the technological use cases that we see today are going to get embedded. I think I want to touch on the point of hybrid intelligence as well, just very quickly, because this is something I hear a lot, and I know the guys at McKinsey know everything we don't, so I'm not going to dive a lot deeper into it, but I don't believe that's actually accurate. Today, you are a subject matter expert because by default, you might know a little bit more through knowledge that you've accumulated for 10 or 15 years about some topic. Whatever took you 10 or 15 years to accumulate knowledge on takes the computer less than 3 milliseconds to put in your 15 years of experience. And needless to say, the computer can be a subject matter expert on so many things in no time.
Things that are qualitative in nature for team building and...
I think the way generative AI is shaping is that it's starting to show us that there are no things that are qualitative in nature. Most things are actually quantitative in nature. And this is just the base case of how things are happening. I think a lot of people are now thinking, okay, you need the intelligence to sit next to the subject matter expert, but the minute the subject matter expertise hit the language model, the subject matter expert is by far and large mostly not very relevant anymore. And this is where I want to be the guy that invited everybody to take a very deep, long look on how they can immediately start embedding generative AI and language models into their day-to-day before it's too late. So hopefully, so those are my two comments on the everything thing. And
Thank you, Abdallah. So for my last question, Saadi, I wanted to ask you, you spoke about regulations and the ethical part of it. Are you afraid it's going to be politicized? So we spoke about this before going on stage. So could we talk just further about that specific aspect, politicizing ethical regulations when it comes to generative AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the output, we are seeing that there are two sides of the story. One is obviously the opportunity. The criticism comes along with it because some of the recommendations which come out of these models are on data sets which are, can be discriminatory, untrained. Obviously, large language models are built on large amounts of data. But when you take this for consumption purposes, there are ethical issues like plagiarism and other topics which also stop some of innovation thinking. So yes, there are two sides of the story. But again, from our side, we are seeing more from an opportunity side. And I think one of the things which we see, which requires a lot of, the models are important, but 90% of the effort is also convincing the non-believers. In a typical organization, 90-95% of the people have very less view on what is artificial intelligence or what does analytics mean, right? So this cultural change element in a large organization is fundamentally an important piece of work and something which if done correctly will give the organization the ability to scale up artificial intelligence very quickly. So yes, there is a lot of criticism. We have seen obviously some global voices here coming up with very strong views. And some of it is possibly right, but it needs the balanced framework. Eventually, it is the responsibility of the institutions who will adopt AI, that how do they put a policy or a governance or experts who will regulate some of, it's not regulatory regulation, but at a micro level, how do you make sure you build the models which are basically improving the lives of the people, which are improving customer experience, not compromising on confidential information. So this will remain an important topic, but at the same time, the opportunity is really, really high, especially in this region. A lot of the institutions are at the start of this journey. I mean, we talked about cloud infrastructure. A lot of the institutions are not there yet, and especially the incumbent ones. And how do they go there? How do they build that infrastructure? How do they launch the cultural change is going to be the key difference between the winners and someone who will still struggle with that journey.
Thank you so much. I want to thank my panelists, and I'm hoping for more discussions like this in the case that ChatGPT and generative AI does not take over my job and journalism as a whole. So thank you again, Abdallah Abu Sheikh, Jinesh Patel, and Saadi Azeem. Thank you so much.